Good morning and welcome to Ask the Expert. I'm Joe Taylor. This morning, another in the ongoing series of programs presented by the Northwest Regional Key Program for Quality Early Learning. The program, through the Northwest Institute of Research, oversees a grant from the Office of Child Development and Early Learning at the Pennsylvania Department of Human Services and the Department of Education. The goal of the program is to improve the outcomes for young children as they prepare for school. John Posa is a community partner specialist for the program, and he's here with us throughout the series. And John, we have another guest this morning on the phone, right?
Yes. Thanks, Joe. Good morning. This morning we have Dr. Fredalene Bowers. Dr. Bowers is the chairperson of the Child Development and Family Relations faculty at Indiana University of Pennsylvania. Dr. Bowers has been the recipient of the Distinguished Faculty Award at IUP. She has done research and teaching on the importance of children's play, as well as the impact of poverty on early childhood. Dr. Bowers also participated in a study tour of the Reggio Emilio schools in Italy and incorporates its practices in her teaching. Welcome, Dr. Bowers.
Thank you, John.
Well, the first thing I wanted to send to you is many thanks and a hello to the many students that I come across that were students of yours at IUP, and they always rave about how wonderful your classes were, so I thought I'd share that with you.
Oh, thank you. That's always good to hear, because that's what teaching's all about, passing knowledge on to students and students enjoying it and being able to use it.
Absolutely. Well, I wanted to ask you because, I think there's a lot of people, including myself, that aren't as familiar with this. When you did the tour of the Reggio Emilio schools, a lot of folks are not aware of that practice of teaching and working with early childhood youngsters. Can you explain a little bit about that experience and what that philosophy is all about?
Yes. The Reggio Emilia philosophy focuses on creativity of children and following the child. In fact, the basis really, or part of the basis, was Maria Montessori very early on in early childhood. And what the Reggio philosophy does is allows children to be creative by giving them opportunities, and the focus is play, giving them opportunities to show their creativity, to exhibit their creativity, to choose activities that they want to do. And to see the program and to see how involved and the types of projects that 3, 4, and 5-year-old children and even toddlers do is just amazing. I mean, it just, you see that and you think, oh my goodness, I never realized that children this young were capable of this type of creativity, this type of activities.
Part of the philosophy is a partnership of teacher, parent, and child. And this is different from what happens in most classrooms today, where the teacher pretty much dictates what goes on in the classroom. Why is it important to bring the parents and even the kids themselves into the mix?
Because the parents are, and I like to say the parents are part of the puzzle. Whenever you're looking at the child and where they are and where we need to move them to so that they'll be successful in school and successful as adults, we need to look at the whole family. And we need to bring the parents in because they know the child. They know the child better than we do. And working together, teachers and parents, to benefit the child. And that's what Reggio does.
The reality of the world today is that both parents usually work. They're busy. So isn't it asking a lot for them to become involved, maybe more than just coming to a parent-teacher conference or monitoring the homework, to get even more involved? And what degree of involvement are we looking for here from parents?
Well, I don't think, we're not looking for involvement where they would come in and spend an entire day with their child, or they would be expected to do extra things with their child. We're talking about that day-to-day involvement when the parent drops the child off, that the teacher goes up, talks to the parent, how was the child's night, anything we need to know. The end of the day, the same thing happens, that the parents are free if they have some extra time to just stop in and look at what's going on in the center, or be part of the center, or be part of the program. So not necessarily, and I was a working parent with 3 sons. So I know exactly where parents are coming from. We're not asking them to come in at night and make commitments to even, a monthly meeting at night. We're asking for that daily. We're talking about that daily contact, that daily positive relationship between the parent and the teacher.
Getting back to the Reggio Emilio philosophy, Dr. Bowers, do you find that this is something that a lot of providers, child care providers in preschools, have incorporated into their teaching methods? And also, does this correspond or does it relate to what we're following in terms of our early learning standards?
In answer to the first part of the question, I think there are quite a few teachers that have heard Reggio Emilia. I don't think they really know what it's about. They might know parts of it. A big part that I forgot to mention is in the Reggio Emilia program, the environment is the third teacher. So how the room is set up, how the room is arranged, pictures on the wall, things like that really impact how the child learns. So I think there's a lot of providers out there, and there's a lot of teachers, again, that have heard the program, but they don't know very much about it. And whenever they hear about it, they do become excited. And whenever they see some photos of, this is a Reggio program, and this is what children can do, and this is how the room is set up, it's like, oh, wow, I never thought of that.
We are in an age, and I feel like I'm going to be trying to throw cold water on this, and I'm not. I'm just playing kind of devil's advocate, as, having been a father of two young girls, where standardized testing is so much a part of the environment in schools these days, I guess beginning as early as the third grade. So how does this gel with the Reggio philosophy, where kids are basically following their own interests, where down the road in a couple of years they're going to be tested on the basic subjects? Is this counterproductive to the goals that are now set for schools and for teachers?
No, it's not, and I didn't really finish the rest of John's answer the rest of John's question too about standards. The one thing I do have to say is Reggio Emilia in Italy, they do not have standards, so they're not bound by the Eckarts, the Innards, the looking at the environment and the standards that we are. However, by saying that children learn through play and are able to pursue what they want to pursue, that doesn't mean that it's just totally unorganized. There are circle times. There's times whenever the teachers work specifically with young children. There's story time. There is science activities. There are math activities. So although it's free and the children make choices and the teacher develops her curriculum based on the children's interests, what the teacher really does is looks at the interest and then takes it to a deeper level. For example, one thing that Reggio is known for, it's called an amusement park for birds. And what they did was children, 3, 4, and 5-year-olds, were interested in birds. And so they went from just talking about birds to making birds to actually reading books about birds to making an actual amusement park where maybe birds could eat, birds could play, and learning just multiple aspects of what it's like to be a bird or a bird's life or science, outdoor activities. So everything is incorporated together. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. It's not only creativity, but it's incorporating science, the outdoors, and really putting the children's thinking caps on to put it all together. Absolutely. I totally get the picture.
Yes, and I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, and so in answer to the question, and we are too focused on testing, but yes, we do testing, and as educators, we have to accept that. In answer to that question, those children, whenever they get in school, do very well. They're very creative. They're able to think in different ways. They know that to understand something, they have to research it. So they're able to go to libraries. They're able to use the Internet. They're able to use all types of material to research, to understand, to experiment. So really, they're further ahead than our children are with just that rote learning or the memorization for tests.
Yes. Now, I know that you've done a lot of work in teaching on children's play. And, for a lot of people who maybe are not as familiar, they look at children's play as just play and not actual learning, which is a misnomer. And we've talked about this before on the program. But tell us a little bit about your work with children's play and some of the research that you've done.
Well, the children's play, people, again, think it's, children are just sitting there willy-nilly playing with things, nothing is happening. But what we know is that children that can do in-depth play, and so let me give you an example of what I'm talking about, in-depth play. Say you have, a couple children playing in a housekeeping area, playing mother or playing doctor, or you have some children in a block area, and they're making a ramp, and they're playing with their cars, and they're making a fire station. When that happens, children they have to do many things to continue that play. They have to increase their cognitive development. So they have to think about, okay, if I'm playing a doctor, what does the doctor do? And it's funny because we don't have to monitor play. Children will tell each other how a doctor does, what a doctor does. Oh, the doctor doesn't do that, or the doctor does that. So the child really has to use their memory. They have to use their language skills. I'm the doctor, I'm going to give you a shot, this isn't going to hurt, or this is going to hurt and I will hold your hand, whatever. They have to do abstract thinking. So while they're playing, they're actually thinking, okay, what does the doctor do next? Or if they're playing fire station, what is the fireman going to do whenever there is a fire? They have to do math problems. They have to do problem solving. What will happen if I give too hard of a shot? Or what will happen if the fire truck drives too fast? What will happen if we don't put out the fire? So they're thinking about all of these experiences, and these real-life experiences, they're playing them out and they understand. So they're using their language, they're using their memory skills, they're using their social development because they're playing with somebody else. And so they have to learn how to play and how to play together in order for that play episode to continue. So just so many things happening in play that we don't think about. We look and we say, oh, they're playing with their dolls, or oh, he's playing with his cars.
I'm going to throw you a question here that's maybe not directly related to what we were just talking about, but going back to IUP, I noticed when I was doing a little bit of your background and on the department that you are now part of the chair of the faculty for child development and family relations, but the actual program includes environmental studies. Is that correct?
Well, the name is, it's sort of a misnomer there. It is environmental studies, but what our department was originally, and this is 50 years ago, it came out of home economics. That was the root.
Right.
And home economics had, the environmental part was fashion, merchandising, and interior design. So our department has child development, family relations, fashion, merchandising, interior design, and family and consumer services. So those other ones are the environmental sciences.
I gotcha. Okay, that clears that up. Yeah. Another thing of passion that you work with is, in terms of your research and in your teaching, is the impact of poverty on early childhood. And I know in the northwestern part of the state, we obviously have pockets of that. And those areas include populations of at-risk children that may not have access to quality early childhood education. What can you tell us about what you've learned in your research and your teaching in this area?
Well, let me just give you a little bit of background why I was interested in it. I've always worked in the rural area, worked most of my life in western Pennsylvania, although I worked with the intermediate unit, so worked with other counties. And the target population that I worked with were at-risk parents and families. So many of them were at the poverty level or just at the poverty level or lower middle income families. And what I often saw, and I would make a comparison between some of the 3 and 4, 5-year-olds that I would see with those families and maybe children I would see in the community in general, is that they were often didn't have the opportunities. For example, where my children would go, we would go on vacation and maybe travel 600 miles. For some of these children to travel 10 miles into Indiana was a lot.
Yeah.
For me, I would try to give my children opportunities like extra experiences, swimming lessons, things that you have to have the extra money to afford that.
Right.
And many of the children and families I saw that I worked with just didn't have that. They did not have that extra money. And then you see that the kids come and don't have the language development. So that was sort of my interest area, and what can we do to help these children? And so thus the importance of Head Start, and why I'm such a supporter of Head Start. But what we have found is that children that live in poverty really have different experiences in several areas. Emotional support, cognitive deprivation or cognitive stimulation, more stress, and more health and safety issues. And then that impacts how they do in school, that impacts their health, that just impacts their life in general.
One of my concerns over the weeks that we've been doing the show, and even before this, and being involved in some things here in the community, is that there tends to be in some rural areas and lower income rural areas an anti-education or anti-learning bias, and my concern is that you can have the greatest pre-K programs and child care programs, but if what these kids are facing when they go home is directly opposed to this kind of input in education and learning, how do you overcome this? And as you said, even stress, where you have maybe a dysfunctional home, an alcoholic home, which unfortunately seems to go with, and not confined to exclusively, with low income or lower income situations. So it seems to me it's an uphill battle. How do you overcome this?
Well, the first thing I think about your comment is oftentimes we say parents don't care, but I've worked with a lot of parents, and it's not that they don't care or they don't value education. It's that they're so overwhelmed with life in general. Just having a secure job, having housing, this type of weather. We're in the middle of winter with deep freezes, having heat in their house. So whenever you're faced with the basic needs or helping your child with homework, basic needs are most important. If you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we need to have food and we need to have shelter. I think the one thing that we forget about as teachers and educators is that connection with parents, and it sort of goes back to what Reggio is doing. We need to make that connection with parents, and we need to support parents. Yes, we're teachers in a school, and maybe we're second-grade teachers, or maybe we're fourth-grade teachers, and we think, I'm really more concerned with the child. Well, yes, we are, but we need to be concerned with the parent, and we need to support them as much as we can. So do they not care, or do they not value education? I think that they value education. I know that they care, but sometimes all the obstacles in life sort of make it overwhelming, and you care about your child, but as long as your child has something to eat and they're warm, that's most important, and then you go on with all the other things that you have to do to take care of your family.
Yeah, family engagement is a critical component. It's definitely something that is a priority for the Office of Child Development and Early Learning and the Pennsylvania Keys. Certainly with our Northwest Regional Key. We had done a focus group on family engagement not too long ago to talk to parents in a variety of different settings, from family settings to child care centers and rural locations, and to get their take on what they looked for in child care. And it was an interesting observation, but we continue to work in that area, and the more that we can get families involved, the better that they will be prepared in working with their children. I'm sure you would agree with that.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And, getting them involved, sometimes parents think that they have to do a homework, or they have to do worksheets, or they have to teach them their letters and numbers. But one of the simplest things that we can tell parents is read to your child. Read to your child. That's the most important thing. And if you read one or two stories every day, and good preschool programs will have a lending library, if you read a story a day or a couple stories a day to your child, that's really going to make an impact on their learning.
I guess one of the other elements of the Reggio philosophy is documenting the activities and results in the classroom, videotaping, kids keeping journals. How do these activities help the teacher and I guess eventually to the parent to help the child learn and grow? What are we learning through observation?
Well, the one thing you're saying to the child, they do documentation and they do portfolios or they do albums. And the child, if they're in a program for, say they start at age 2 and they're there until age 4, that documentation, that album, that portfolio is passed from teacher to teacher. So when the child leaves the program, they get it, and the parent gets it. And that's saying to the child, what you do is very important. We value it. We've taken your picture. We've put samples of your drawings in here. And so that's the first thing it's saying. To the parent and to the teacher, and I always found this amazing as a teacher, you might think, oh, I remember that child whenever they came in September, and they could do this and this, and now they're doing a little bit better. But when you look at that documentation, you actually see this is what they did. This is how they were drawing. This is the extent of their drawing and how detailed their drawing was. And then you look at it 5 months later or a year later or a year and a half, and it's oh, my goodness, look what that child can do now. Look at the details in their drawing. Look at how long they spent working on that block building. They were in that block corner for 15 minutes, and then you take a picture of the elaborate block structure that they built. So it just tells us so much about the child, and it allows us to take snapshot pictures, so to speak, of different points in their life, and where are they? Is this where they should be developmentally? Because we know what 3-year-olds should, we know how many words they should say, we know how long they should be able to engage and play, and who they should be able to play with. And then we can look at that child, and is this where they are? And if it isn't, what can we do to help that child move along so whenever they get to school, they're ready for learning?
Dr. Bowers, as a member of academia, I definitely want to ask you the question because it's, as anyone would, where do you see the future in terms of early childhood education? Where do you think we're headed in terms of new opportunities and a success?
Well, the one thing that I think has been wonderful for our field of early childhood is the brain research. The CAT scans that they're able to do now in young children, the importance of those early years, the first 3 years of life, the first 5 years of life. We used to say, oh, they're just babies, they don't really need a lot of stimulation. Now we know that that's really important. So we have that research behind us. And hopefully with legislators and with our politicians, we're going to be able to give that research to them, and we're going to be able to say, we need to put this money into early childhood. We have some long-term studies that have looked at children for 20 years now, and they have seen if a child is in a high-quality early childhood program, if parents are involved, and we need to bring those parents in, that we're going to make a difference in children's lives. We're going to prevent so many special ed placements. We're going to have children that are able to learn, and they come to school, and they're excited about learning. So I think we're in a good place, but we're always fighting for the dollars. Children don't vote. And so it's up to us to fight for those dollars for more early childhood programs. That's
for sure. Dr. Bowers, our time is just about up. I wanted to thank you so much. It was definitely enlightening. We learned a lot from the program, and thank you so much for all the work that you do in bringing our next teachers up in early childhood, and we'll hope to have you back again.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to have this opportunity, and as you can tell, I feel passionately about my field, children, and families.
Absolutely.
And that's our program for today. We'll be back in 2 weeks at this same time. In the meantime, you can go online to learn more at papromiseforchildren.com. If you have questions, please email them to questions@nwirkey.org. For John Posa and the Northwest Regional Key Program for Quality Early Learning, I'm Joe Taylor. Thank you for listening, and have a great day.